And I should mention that Karen actually has a distinguished public service career as well as being Vice President CN. She was appointed by the Bush the Elder, I call him Bush the Wise. Not that I'm a Democrat or anything, but no, she served in the U.S. Department of Transportation. She served as a board member of the ICC. She's worked with the Senate, the Finance Committee. I mean, she's had a distinguished public service career that I wanted to acknowledge, in addition to the outstanding work at CN and working with Canadian American Business Council and all the different organizations that we champion to improve the relationship. I do want to thank all of you for being here. I'm about to introduce a delightful speaker that I know you'll enjoy. I want to thank a number of you who actually served in my administration for your service, and others who didn't but are serving. I appreciate that. I should also say that I am working closely with Governor Snyder on the new international trade crossing, just so you know that. I talk with him on a regular basis, both face-to-face and on the phone. He reached out, and I got involved. I also want to acknowledge my partner and wife and best friend, Janet Blanchard, who's back there. So. Now, I introduce Warren Everson. He is Senior Vice President for Policy for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. In that capacity, he orchestrates and manages a team of different policy committees and lobbyists. He's an experienced lobbyist and public policy thinker. He at one point was Director of Government Relations for Bell Canada, which is huge. He was also Vice President for Policy and Strategic Planning for the Air Transport Association of Canada. He was Chief of Staff to several cabinet ministers in Canada during the Mulroney era, even though despite his, and other ministers as well, despite his youthful appearance, he is a veteran of the political wars and is one of the outstanding political commentators in Canada, and we're very lucky to have him here. I know on behalf of MSU's Center for Canadian Studies and all of our friends here who serve in Michigan government or are working to influence in a positive way Michigan government, I give you Warren Everson. Warren?
Well, thank you very much. That's a very flattering introduction. I feel like I should be taller or something. And it goes some way to overcoming a problem I always have when I speak in the United States. Years ago, one of the satirical magazines, it might have been The Onion or Mother Jones, had a front cover thing about Canada. It had a picture of a kind of gap-toothed idiot on the front cover, and the title was Our Retarded Cousin on the Northern Border. And it scarred me deeply. I'm always intimidated when I come down. I do want to thank Canadian National for this terrific forum, and especially Anne-Marie for inviting me. I was at the university yesterday and sat in on the discussions at the Canadian Studies Center. Fascinating work that they're doing, and that's where I gave up all my best material, as will become immediately obvious to you today. What I kept, Karen stole a few minutes ago, so we might want to move directly to an applause, and you could all get back to work a little earlier. And it's interesting that the Canadian Studies Center and Canada and the United States enjoy what must surely be the closest relationship between two sovereign nations. And you kind of ask yourself, is it necessary for us to be studying that relationship? I'm going to make a case here in my remarks that it is important to study the relationship. And you go to any bookstore and there's the self-help sections, and they make a big point about relationships need work. They always do. And it's very difficult for 30 million Canadians to take 300 million Americans out to dinner. Flowers are going to be impossible. So instead we have to do a more academic approach, and then discussions like this. And I hope at the end of my remarks, is there going to be an opportunity for some discussion? Yes. It's always my favorite part. So I know that the Canada-Michigan relationship is extremely important, and when at the Chamber of Commerce we have and other chamber people will agree with this, we have the curse of and blessing of every issue coming to us. And so that's kind of fun. But it means you get to make choices about anything you want to do. My boss, Perrin Beatty, is president of the Canadian Chamber, and he and I agreed in the fall that the Canada-U.S. relationship required some work by governments. It required work by business communities as well. And so we've spent quite a bit of time defining what we're trying to do, and he spent a lot of time in the United States. He was here not long ago. and met with the governor, and he's been all over the U.S. We chose Michigan as our first target, being that we believe it to be the most important of our state relationships, and I mean, the reasons are pretty obvious. In Michigan, I think they'd be clear, something like 250,000 people in this state occupy what we call trade with Canada dependent position. Not the largest in the United States. I think that's Texas with over 500,000 jobs dependent on Canadian trade. But Michigan sits right in the heart of our industrial relationship, and we are observing, as I know many of you know, incredible kickback in the numbers on trade since the recession, with a 40% increase last year in trade, back up to $60 billion, which is real money in almost anybody's currency. The largest trade corridor between sovereign nations in the world is the Ambassador Bridge, all by itself. So Canada is feeling an unusual amount of smugness right now. It makes us even more annoying than we often are, and some of it quite undeserved. Our economic situation is better than most countries in the G8. We had a less serious recession, and it left us more quickly, thanks in part to an incredible amount of demand for commodities, which we are fortunate enough to be sitting on. In the fall, I was still fairly dubious, and I was telling the press that I thought there were a lot of black clouds around that could challenge the Canadian economic situation. In particular, we have very, very large amounts of personal debt and household debt, and I thought that was going to suppress retail demand in the Christmas season. We had the Bank of Canada and the finance minister out warning people that they had to pull in a little bit and spend less of their money and so forth. In fact, we had a very, very strong Christmas season, and the retail business has been booming in Canada, which puts me in mind of Will Rogers' comment that it was stupidity that got us into this problem, and who's to say it can't get us out. You know? But mostly we've benefited from the fact that our commodities are rising in both value and volume. Part of that is Asian demand, and part of it is an unexpectedly robust response from the United States, coming back much faster than we expected. Even the housing sector is going to bottom soon. It looks like most of the unsold material is out of the system now.